Let me read to you a passage from the 14th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 1 to 6. It's the Gospel for Friday of the 30th week of Ordinary Time. St. Luke writes, One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So he took the man, healed him, and sent him away. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out?" To this they could find no answer. That's from Luke chapter 14, verse 1 to 6. What does this suggest to us? Well, as everyone who is familiar with the Gospels knows, certain leading Pharisees, Sadducees, and members of the temple aristocracy orchestrated an intense opposition to and hatred of Jesus Christ, culminating in his trial and death. The Roman procurator could see that it was envy that motivated their handing Jesus over to him, and he could see that there was no legal basis for what they wanted him to do. What we also notice in the Gospels is the sheer sovereignty of Christ's person in his dealings with those who chose to be his enemies. They just could not get the better of him. And our Gospel scene of today, from Luke chapter 14, verse 1 to 6, gives us one typical glimpse of this. We read, a prominent Pharisee, who was clearly mixed in his motives, and who watched him narrowly, invited Jesus to his house to dine. Our Lord, with his usual magnanimity of heart, and desiring to reclaim for his Father all who were wayward and blind, accepted the invitation and sat with the Pharisees. Inside, there was in front of him a man suffering from dropsy. Of course, we read, he was being carefully watched, for it was a Sabbath day. Perhaps the invitation to dine had been extended after the Sabbath synagogue service. We see our Lord regally above their pettiness of mind and unworried about their desire to discover in him acts that flouted religious observance. With the religious leaders and experts reclining before him, he calmly asked, perhaps with a smile playing on his face, if it were against the Sabbath to heal. None of them answered, for on all past occasions they had been instantly worsted in religious debate. If any had ventured to assert that it was against the Sabbath to heal, that person would have been put to confusion by Christ's unfailing insight and infallible judgment. So, with the leaders in silence before his calm challenge, Christ sovereignly cured the man with dropsy, and with effortless reasoning about the divine stipulation of the Sabbath observance, showed the absurdity of their strictures. Then he asked them, if one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull him out? To this they could find no answer. The point here, though, is the absolute uniqueness of Jesus Christ, of which this gospel incident is a passing manifestation. This uniqueness is shown not only in the gospel accounts of our Lord's earthly life, but also in the power of his presence and influence after his death, beginning with his resurrection. It is a lordship exercised by love, age after age. Consider the words of Napoleon Bonaparte during his exile on St. Helena. There the conqueror of Europe called Count Montholon and asked him, "Can you tell me who Jesus Christ was? The Count declined to answer. Bonaparte gave his own response. "Well then, I will tell you," he said. "Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, and I myself have founded great empires. But upon what did these creations of our genius depend? Upon force. Jesus alone founded his empire upon love, and to this very day millions will die for him. I think I understand something of human nature, and I tell you, all these were men, and I am a man. None else is like him. Jesus Christ was more than a man. I have inspired multitudes with such an enthusiastic devotion that they would have died for me. But to do this, it was necessary that I should be visibly present with the electric influence of my looks, my words, of my voice. When I saw men and spoke to them, I lightened up the flame of self-devotion in their hearts. Christ alone has succeeded in so raising the mind of man towards the unseen that it becomes insensible to the barriers of time and space. Across a chasm of 1800 years, Jesus Christ makes a demand which is beyond all others difficult to satisfy. He asks for that which a philosopher may often seek in vain at the hands of his friends, or a father of his children, or a bride of her spouse, or a man of his brother. He asks for the human heart. He will have it entirely to himself. He demands it unconditionally, and forthwith his demand is granted. Wonderful! In defiance of time and space, the soul of man, with all its powers and faculties, becomes an annexation to the empire of Christ. All who sincerely believe in him experience that remarkable supernatural love towards him. This phenomenon is unaccountable. It is altogether beyond the scope of man's creative powers. Time, the great destroyer, is powerless to extinguish this sacred flame. Time can neither exhaust its strength nor put a limit to its range. This is it which strikes me most. I have often thought of it. This it is which proves to me quite convincingly the divinity of Jesus Christ. That was what Napoleon said. Well, for a very pragmatic man in matters of religion, one who roughly used the Catholic Church for his own power and glory, that expresses great insight. Napoleon the Conqueror saw how Jesus Christ had conquered. It was not by force, but by winning the heart. But of course, there was more to it than a mere strategy of love. Jesus Christ was the greatest man in all of human history because he was divine. He was God incarnate, who bore on his shoulders the sin of the world and expiated for it all, opening up to sinful man the opportunity of holiness and the gates of heaven. The condition was clear: belief in him shown by obedient love. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. How great the pity that a man of Napoleon's talents altogether missed this throughout his stellar life, a life that involved rivers of blood, tears, and death.